Lovely, Rob. Thank you so much. Always wonderful to start our day with your music. Thank you. So, welcome everyone. I'm very, very happy to be here today. I think you all know me, Lisa Marcus, and for those of you who don't, I'm here in Texas, in the US, and great to see people from all over the world. Wonderful. Today's a very special day. I'm very, very happy to be here, and I'm very, very much looking forward to the journey that you are going to take us on today, Aviv.
So, yes, thank you all for coming. Today is the holiest day in the Jewish calendar. I was not raised in a religious Orthodox context. I was raised in a part of the secular side of Israel and born and raised in a kibbutz. But around the age of 14, this day became an important day. And it continued to evolve through the years. Not so much with the nature of atonement, but more in the nature of attuning to the soul, attuning to my purpose in life, attuning into how can I serve in the best possible way, the circumstances that I'm in, and always with the nature of okay, how would I want to absolve this last year, and what would I want to seek to attune to the coming year? So I feel especially privileged and delighted that we can be in this ecology together and actually be in the inquiry of attuning to the soul together. The way of today is very much a light workshopping day, a bit of a stroll. It's like, imagine we are going up a trail and we're pausing and looking at a vista and chatting about it, and then we're taking a few more steps and then looking at another angle of the vista. And the idea is I'm going to demonstrate what I sometimes describe as the alternating current of, in one inquiry, attune to the soul. We are already tuning to the soul. And in another inquiry, practicing this which we are describing as loom work or loom thinking or loom inquiry. And guess what? We're going to be attuned all by cultivating this loom work approach, and we're going to be cultivating the loom work approach by attuning to the soul. And so, since I brought it up, the idea is that so yes, tuning to your soul in times of change. We'll talk about that. And possibly you have a chance to print a few copies of this. And if you didn't, there's nothing to worry about. Just you can still have time to grab a few pieces of paper and a pen, and you can begin to draw these frames. And I'm showing 9, but you may choose to do 12 or 16 on a page. And the idea is that by the end of today, you'll have maybe 2 or 3 or 4 pages like this that you have cultivated. And part of the practice we are going to demonstrate in this is that when something important that you feel is important is either arising in you, or you heard me say, or somebody else is saying, and you say, that's something I want to dedicate a space for, you write it down in one of those spaces. And like, for example, you may even right now, as we begin, and as you hear my narrating voice in the background, you may choose to go to the first upper left space and write the inquiry that's alive for you about the soul. You may write, what is the soul. You may write, uh, how do I attune to the soul? I don't know how to prevent people to draw on my board. So what you want is to actually on your page rather than um, rather than on the screen. And obviously, we will have to learn how to delete marks, but it's kind of nice. It already gives us a sense of a workshop. So I'm not too worried about having some yellow and blue marks there. That looks fine to me. Um, so, and what I will do a bit of an opening, describe two ways of learning that I want us to consider in the beginning, and then describe several inquiries that we will explore. And the idea is that then as we unfold it step by step, we will bring a couple of voices and then do another piece and then bring another voice and just be in the bit like you are in the studio and people have their canvases up and bringing their markers. And obviously, I'm going to demonstrate my approach into it. The essence of the invitation is for you to discover your approach. You will not be creating my loom, you'll be creating your loom. And part of that, it's not an intellectual or brain exercise. It's a way of listening inside. It's a way of listening to your feelings, listening to your thoughts, listening to the flow that's emerging for you, listening to what's arising for you. And granted, when you are on your own and you will then do this practice, you may take longer pauses than we will take in this journey today because we have precious time. So I recognize that the natural speed may even be slower, even though I'm going to approach it, at least at the beginning, not in any way fast, but rather allow the discovery to find us. So the place to begin. Well, the place to begin, let me actually remove this for a moment and see if there are any concerns. And do we have thumbs up to unfold the journey? Thumbs up, great. Okay, thank you. Okay, so actually it's good to stay in the gallery for a moment and I'll bring up the slides in just a moment again. Where I would start is by highlighting two different kinds, two different natures of learning that you want to avail ourselves of and attune to and recognize inside the context of attuning to the soul. Because part of the inquiry explored today will be around, well, so how do you inquire? How do you attune to the soul? What stands in the way of attuning to the soul? Are we not anyway already automatically by having showed up in this life attuned to the soul? And if yes, what's the difference between the natural automatic attunement to the soul to the one that would arise when we bring intentional presence full kind of attunement where we are inquiring deeply? So these are some of the questions we will explore today. And each of those questions, by the way, deserves its own loom. So you may end up today with half a dozen or more looms. That's up to how you choose to distill this. The idea is that anytime you put something in one of those spaces, you literally are instructing your mind, instructing your soul that this may be something you want to come back to. You know how some people put on their refrigerator in the kitchen some sayings of some wise people. Well, you could choose to put your loom and take yourself to be the wise person framing an inquiry that you may choose to see every morning when you make your cup of coffee. How do I attune to the soul? So you remember every morning as you open the refrigerator, what is a question that you want to reflect on? So, two kinds of learnings: horizontal learning and vertical learning. And when I will describe vertical learning, I will describe two kinds of vertical learning. And you'll see that the whole way of today will be, I suppose you could call it a recursive process, because we're going to go through something and then we're going to expand in a certain direction, and we're going to come back to it and address it from another angle. And that's part of just a way of the soul, which is not the linear brain logic of just from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next. And if we are based in our brains, the way of this could even be irritating at some point. But the signaling, the message we are sending to the brain is, come along for the ride and acquiesce, to let the soul and the symphonic part of the mind. Yes, I'm making a distinction between the brain and the mind. This is something we will attend to later in chapters from Portals into the Soul that I'm going to be working on in the next few months. And the awareness is that if this process is difficult for the brain to follow, I can promise you it's absolutely most natural for the soul to orchestrate your process awareness around, and it's absolutely natural for the symphonic nature of the mind to relax into it. Horizontal learning is the process we go into by addition. So it's expansion by addition. If you think about the ancient world, where if you were not a crusade and if you're not on a pilgrimage, you lived in a village, and maybe you traveled 5 or 10 or 15 miles away from the village, sometimes even not that, for the entirety of your life. So the one point when you extended for 15 miles outside of the perimeters of the village, that was learning, horizontal learning, learning by addition. When you learn a new word and you add it to your vocabulary, most times this would be considered horizontal learning. Unless, of course, the word that you have learned emerged inside the context of vertical learning. So horizontal learning is when I expand by addition. Vertical learning is when I experience an elevation that affords me a new perspective, inside of which there is a permission and affordance to somewhat transform and reform the everything that I already know inside that new elevated context, which is quite different to the nature of learning by addition. When I learn by addition, I did not transform the space that I already occupied. When I enter a new perspective, a new level of appreciation, part of the law of integration says that I then, if it is truly something that I embrace, I then need to recapitulate, that is to say, to reprocess or rearrange the everything that I already know inside the context of that new appreciation. In the absence of which, I may suffer what I would describe as a perception shutdown. Perception shutdown is when you come into a couple 3-hour process like this, and at some point the atmospherics and the the awareness that we are generating, activated something in you. So you have a perspective that affords you the capacity, the access to see something from a different level. And now you walk away from it and you have two options. You either are able to retain it, but to retain it, it really means you are going through some process of integration. And the integration really means there is a process, conscious or semi, and to a degree unconscious, that reevaluates all that you hold dear inside of the context of the new perspective that has reemerged. So just mid-flight, as I describe, and I'm in a minute going to describe the second nature of vertical learning, it's possible that your loom may now look like this or different. But this is just an example of how, as I said, I will alternate between the development of a loom. So in this case, I've chosen to bring horizontal development learning, expand by addition, and two kinds of vertical development learnings. One is elevate by integration, and the other is by depth activation. So depth activation is really not learning. It's more retrieval. It's when I will be saying something, or I'm saying, say something next 10 minutes or in half an hour, or you're in a situation where somebody says something and it appears as though you've learned it, but you're really more experiencing it. Oh yeah, of course. I've known it all along. It was latent in my system. Perhaps I came even to this life with this awareness, if your map of belief affords you the permission to consider that, and you'd say, right, that's right. So that is not really me teaching or anybody teaching anyone. It really is more that inside the discovery process that we are embarking on, some of what is being described just instantly makes sense. And you're not really acquiring it or even taking my words into your head, so to speak. It's more that it comes alive in you because it was in you before, perhaps not articulated in quite the same way, not in the same words, not with the same language, but the latency of that perception, of that awareness, of that know-how has been in you either from earlier in this life or something that you have traveled through several iterations and that's right, is already coded and encoded into your soul. And all you needed was to come into an ecology where it will be permitted to be activated out of the natural depth of your life that perhaps by circumstance or variety of other reasons, you haven't had a chance to activate until now. So these are learning processes that are always available for us. And perhaps you write in your loom something other than what I wrote. Perhaps you'd write in your loom, oh, well, what is the place of horizontal development learning in my journey at this time? And then you may choose to dedicate another space to, well, when have I experienced important vertical moments of vertical learning? The first time I traveled to Shanghai, China, 13 years ago, I was there to lead a leadership event, a strategy leadership event for a large Silicon Valley organizations with teams all around the world. And on the second morning, I went through the process that I would often lead in an event like this. I'd lead them through what I call the 3 pillars of trust. Became a very important tool set that I taught to many leadership teams from the beginning of, from even earlier in the 2000s. And so we finished that segment. And up until now, I'm going through the motions. I'm enjoying their engagement, but I'm so far mostly in horizontal learning because I'm for the first time in Shanghai. And we're going into lunch break. And the leader, sponsor of the organization says to me, Aviv, you just shared with us very powerful language about the 3 pillars of trust. If there is a way for you to lead us to actually embody it by way of our behavior to such that it can become part of the way we operate, that would be very valuable. And I experienced what I sometimes will experience on my journey. I experienced when he said that. We were literally walking to the restaurant area. I experienced a shiver down my spine because I knew I was in the presence of one of those moments I always hope to find, which is I am being called to birth a new depth in my work. And we arrived into the restaurant area. I literally finished lunch in 5 minutes. I knew I needed to get back into the conference room, into the meeting room. And I got there and I started walking in circles. And I went through used the 45-minute lunch break to truly birth what then became a piece of work that was central with all the teams I've worked with since then, which was a way of conducting them in real time, giving birth to effective conversations by way of expressing unmet needs, concerns, and creating an ecology, a safe ecology where I gave myself permission to intercept them midline to rescript their language to help them accelerate dramatically the behavioral liberation of a high trust, high transparency organization. That became, so when I visited Shanghai, China, that by itself was a horizontal learning. That discovery of a new behavioral modality with establishing a Samoan circle in the middle and bringing people in the middle to demonstrate that behavior, which then became part of the consulting practice that I've used, that was a moment of vertical discovery. I was literally birthing for myself a permission that I've not seen before and have not experienced before, but I tasked my soul, so to speak, to respond to the opportunity of the moment. Now, you may do it in your way. Somebody would do this in front of the canvas when they paint. Rob does it right here, right now, at the beginning of our day. He's in front of his keyboard and he's got his feelings and he knows what the day is about. And he is able to configure the musical chords that will produce for us the atmospheric that in a few minutes when we will go into a bit of a quiet time and Rob will play again, then that's the way he does it with his toolset. I don't have the capacity to do it with a keyboard. I always feel that anybody that is able to play live music to accommodate and enhance and augment the energetic and atmospheric nature of what we are doing, that's the greatest gift of all. So I just feel so lucky that we have some talented people that can do it along the journey with us. So here I am. So far, I've suggested that as a possible articulation on your loom. I added those as additional boxes because I want to keep the other frames as an open space for something else. And let's just recognize you could choose to create a new loom under perception shutdown syndrome. And that loom will describe, well, what is the phenomenology of the perception awakening, perception opening, and then the perception shutdown syndrome. That's a very important, if you're somebody who is engaged in the exploration of those domains, then the phenomenology of it, the energetics of it, the atmospherics of it, the faculty activation becomes very important elements. You ask and inquire, what is it? What is the phenomena nature of I can be in a conductive environment with others, and it will liberate and activate for me something. And that's great. I'm expanding to see what I couldn't see before. And then what happens when I walk away from it? Is it natural that I don't stay in that expanded state? Yes, absolutely. It's natural. We can't always stay in the expanded state. But what is a way to expand and contract in such a way that I then do it more in a self-regulated way rather than the perception and the enhanced awareness is being snatched away from me and I no longer can access it? One of the ways perception shutdown syndrome occurs is I've been working with groups for 40 years, so I've learned to pay attention. You'd have people saying to you certain things inside the ecology of the experience, and you'd meet them a day later or a week later. It's almost as though they were under the influence, so to speak. They don't remember what they said. They were under some influence. But the point is, we're not trying to take any person away from their natural progression with their own development and evolution. Actually, perception shutdown syndrome is completely natural until such time as you build the etching impressions and etching agreements and etching access in yourself such that you're able to trace and retrace back the kind of pathway to those awarenesses. So I'd like to pause here and see if anybody wants to show us a loom and read one of the frames of what you wrote in the loom, just so we get inside the practice. Anybody, please.
And this is part from the preparation. How do I locate and learn to recognize the soul?
Beautiful.
Many voices inside: the blood, the emotions, the brains, spirit, mentality, nerves. So what's the soul as distinct from those? I have some idea of what the nerves feel like, but how does that relate to the soul? Blood, maybe? Yeah.
Yeah, wonderful. That's right. I mean, right there is a whole loom. Recognizing the many inner lives, the many inner parts. What are they? Which parts are parts that were frozen in time because of difficult experiences, and which are the naturally emerging parts, and what are the parts that are part of the physiology of the human model, and yes, what are the naturally arising wisdom voices that are part of your unique inclination, part of how you are wired uniquely, and how do we learn to listen to these voices, to encourage them. And yeah, that's right. It's completely safe here to say that you have many voices within you rather than carry an outdated perspective that, oh, well, something is wrong with you when you claim that you have many voices. No, actually, it's the most natural thing to recognize about the nature of being human, the nature of our humanity. We are many in one. Please, Liz.
You mentioned that when you were in Shanghai, that you recognized that there was a need to unearth concerns, what was getting in the way. So on my loom, my first question is, what's not conscious, or what am I not aware of that may be getting in the way for this deeper connection to my soul voice, let's say, or my soul's expression? So how would I begin that loom? It's like I want to go into something that I'm not aware of yet.
And we're heading there right now in a couple of minutes. That's one of the areas we're heading into. Great. Please, Peter.
Yeah, I'm just struck immediately that to contemplate these, the soul and these ideas, you just automatically start to slow down in yourself. And we talk about the brain and this idea that just slowing down a little bit to hear differently, because the ideas and the questions about the soul kind of bring, it feels to me, into a deeper place and a deeper set of knowings. And so just really wanted to point that out, that the contemplation of these boxes and what would I put in there kind of slows you down. And I think that's very valuable already.
That's really beautiful, Peter, because you're already demonstrating that we are a symphonic arrangement. That's why we want to listen to what is showing up through each and every one of us. What Peter just offered now carries part of the answer to the previous Peter and to comment and to list, because Peter earlier spoke about, well, how do I differentiate between the different lives? And we just got one of the clues. Speed, pressures, intensities, slowing down, speeding up are some of the ways we will attune to differentiate between those different lives. And so listening to these, feeling those distinctions, letting different parts of the system listen, not just listening with the head, listening with the whole human system, all of it is part of the exercise. Please, Lisa.
It's the first thing that came to me. It's so funny, Aviv, was this morning in preparation for today, I woke up and I did a complete cleaning, organizing of my house. And I immediately thought, okay, so if that's causing soul settlement, because I truly believe it does, and I very often do that when I'm going to be part of a process, then what is it? So it's not the cleaning of the house, obviously, or the organizing. That's the outcome. But what does it cause in this soul that settles me that I could infiltrate into other parts of my life?
Well, right there, you're describing and hinting to the kind of rituals. So yes, we clean the house to clean the house, but what you're describing, Lisa, is there are all sorts of rituals that we may choose to engage with on a daily basis that are part of how we access the soul. I will reveal my age a little bit when I will say that back in the time when we didn't have a dishwasher, I love doing the dishes because my dishes practice was the 2 or 3 times a day I would talk to my soul. So let's take one more voice and then begin to build this. Please, Theodora.
Yes, hello. It's in the area of education, which I have been busy with and occupied for many decades too. And it is that when I'm teaching children, I'm aware that we are aiming to them being educated in this horizontal way, adding things. But I also feel it, I see it, and I try as well to not have their brain superimpose or dominate so much the soul. So sometimes we do poetry, and there is a problem there that their soul has already shrunk and is not interested because of the mathematics and the grammar and the drills they had done the previous rest of the day, that it's like I'm all the time feeling like searching in the dark how to locate me, my soul, so that their soul can also come up and play and listen and feel, say, the poetry. So it's a very big challenge in education, the domination of the brain, and not allowing the soul to play, to come up, to feel, to experience.
Indeed. So thank you for this, Theodora, because what Theodora just gave us permission to integrate into this journey today is, yes, you can choose to integrate into the journey the inquiry of how do I attune to my soul in the context of your personal soul-searching journey. Because what you're essentially saying, Theodora, well, if I recognize that we all have a soul and the soul carries an important orchestrating function, then that is something that I would want to bring to the table and have as one of my awareness points when I work with students. So with that, let me just now bring the next couple of steps, and then we'll bring more voices. We were here, right? So we talked about the energetic dimension. Ultimately, when we enter vertical learning, often there is an energetic dimension that either helped us make the vertical elevation or helped awaken for us something on the inside that was latent. And so you'd inquire, well, so how do I get back inside this ecology or generate this ecology by myself, for myself, such that I may be able to access these perceptions? So now, let us begin to ask this question that rhymes with what Liz offered a few minutes ago, which is, what do you need to overcome? What are the barriers? What are the obstacles that you need to overcome when you seek to attune to the soul? I'll let you reflect on this for a moment. And then maybe we can bring a voice or two. So I'm going to go quiet for a moment. Perhaps, Rob, you want to give us 40 seconds of music here as people begin to access this inquiry. What do you need to overcome in order to attune to your soul? Thank you. Thank you, Rob. So there is so much that could be said in response to that starter inquiry. For a start, you could say that many people, they are asleep, they are unaware to the actuality of the soul to start with. So yes, please, Emmy, what would you say you need to overcome?
I would say I would need to overcome my self-view, because if my soul would suggest something and my inner answer would be, I can't do that, no action will follow. And I think a remedy would be to trust my soul, because it has been instructed and been living in me for a long time. So I could trust that my soul would know what I can do.
Indeed. Thank you. Thank you, Emmy. Please, Janice, what stands in the way of attuning to the soul?
Yes, hi. Well, it's interesting because, when you pose this question, I thought one of my questions that I put in when you asked us to sort of start our own loom is, why is it important to attune to the soul? So
you allow me to bring that question on screen, right?
So I felt like I didn't get a chance, to do much. So when I saw this question, I thought, well, how can I know how to overcome whatever, may be standing in the way if I don't know the reason why it would be important in the first place? But I did take I still did say a few things about would be feeling at distance from or separate from the soul, rather than it being an integrated part of the human design. Also, relying on the five senses to come into greater contact with the soul. We can't sort of see it. We can, I guess, feel it, but some of those senses that I think are needed to connect more to the soul go beyond the traditional idea of the five senses. So those are some starters I had.
We're getting some excellent starters here. Do I have a way to trust my soul? Am I close enough, or am I distant from the soul? And if yes, what is distancing me? And the last thing you're saying, Janice, is, well, do I give myself permission to go beyond the five senses, the traditional brain pathways to sensory input? Please, Sus.
What is the relation between the soul and cognizance? Because one of the words that has been repeated so far in this conversation is the word recognition. And in the understanding of the word recognition is cognizance. So there is somehow a relation between the soul and the cognition in humans. What is that about?
Yeah, it's a beautiful question that will take us into a completely different tangent. Because and it actually is something that I'm working on to write into the next chapters. It is to do with the interface of the soul and the mind.
Yes.
Because the soul has an orchestrating function for the mind, and the mind has an important input into the soul, and there is a mutual interface, mutual cognition of those invisible players. The short answer is to contemplate and appreciate what is the function of consciousness, what is the function of cognition in the evolutionary process, and why is it that human life is the arising of a life that is conscious of its consciousness, and then, by the way, can become conscious of the nature of consciousness itself.
Yes.
So 3 steps: a life that become conscious, a life that become conscious that it is conscious, and a life that becomes conscious of the very nature of consciousness, which is where there is a breakthrough evolutionary pathway that opens. But you're really shooting me way into the future of this work, and the simple place to ground it now, not as an end, because part of the reason why we're doing Looms is we don't want to provide final answer to anything. We want to take any inquiry as a starter. But here is where you could begin this inquiry, which is to contemplate that the universe itself is a learning process that wants to continue to evolve. So if the universe is a learning process that wants to continue to evolve, how will it build unto itself a learning mechanism? Well, it will have to develop some feedback loop in which there is a witnessing cognizant function. So you could say in a contemplative fashion that the entire universal process is to facilitate the arising of conscious life, one that's conscious of itself, and one that through this consciousness enables and liberates a learning consciousness inside the process of the universe. So how about if I held it there for now, and we come back to it in the future?
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's bring Mary Ann, please.
Could it be said that consciousness is some kind of navigation system for the soul? Because that which we focus our attention on is the channel of nourishment for the soul.
It's a wonderful framing. It's a wonderful inquiry. And if you follow that, you would ask the follow-up question, Marianne, which is, okay, suppose it is so, as you're suggesting. So how does it work? How is the mind a navigation facility for the soul? Because the soul itself has navigational powers, but as you're suggesting, part of the navigational powers of the soul actually work through the pathways of the mind. So there is a lot to open up here. I think our minds right now are getting excited by these inquiries, and I'm gonna pull us back into the inquiry of what stands in the way of attuning to the soul, and bring Patrick in, please, Patrick.
Yeah, thank you. It's interesting because I was able to reframe a bit what I was going to say just in the process of this. And originally, I was going to say what came up earlier was sometimes there's a tension between horizontal and vertical learning. I was looking at horizontal as being acquiring of facts and new knowledge, and we just acquire things, and it's great. But then when you have an inspiration about something, you get something that comes in truly from left field, from the unknown, and it causes you to question what you thought were facts. And then you have to go through this kind of process of how do I reconcile what I'm really feeling with what I'm being told is the truth. And then I came to then what I really need to overcome is what I need to learn is trust. How do I learn to trust what I'm getting through my other systems and maybe a vertical learning that this is something I can incorporate into my life and actually try?
Well, Patrick, what you're describing is the practice of conscious, intentional integration. And vertical learning, vertical development invites this integration process. The reality is, for most people, the integration process happens at a semi-conscious level. Most people will too busy to. I'm going to list some of the things now and as I do, let me just bring that loom because we're going to work concurrently at few levels. So we said that most people are too distracted, too busy, too preoccupied with a whole range of things. What you are demonstrating is, well, to actually process through integration, I need to slow down, as Peter earlier said. And I need to actually perhaps even ask myself, well, this new perspective, this new appreciation, if I am to fully admit this as my new updated operating system, well, what are some of the previously held beliefs that I need to re-examine and bring up to date? Now, many people will tell you, Patrick, this is too much hassle, too much work. I don't have time to do that. But that's why we don't need to rush. We can get to whatever we can get to. Some of the integration process happens not at a conscious, deliberate level. It happens more at an energetic, semi-conscious way. One of the ways you'd see that is something you used to feel very strong about. It comes up again a year or two later, and all of a sudden, there is no soda in the water. It lost its fizz. It's lost its power. It lost its grip on you. Why? Because you have updated the center of gravity of where you are metabolizing life. Now, it is always very helpful to actually accompany this process of inquiry and update consciously, if you can. And a person that wants to be diligent about it will go through, okay, what are some of the important beliefs that I held maybe 10 years ago, but that I've since updated, but never gave myself full account of? That would be a useful storytelling of your journey practice engage in.
Yeah,
Let me, please.
So it seems very useful to allow yourself that conscious time of updating and to actually, with intention, go in and look around and why things don't feel the way they felt before, and to give yourself a chance to update what you actually are seeing and what you actually believe.
That's right. Once we embrace a developmental premise, this idea that you sometimes see in politics, where if somebody changed the view, they have points against them. How can you be a human? How can you live a human life without continually updating your views, right? So another obstacle, and then I'm going to bring the other hands, another obstacle you want to consider, and by the way, you do see that I'm asking the question in several different ways. I asked earlier, what stands in the way? And now I'm asking, what are the obstacles that to attuning to the deeper spiritual reality of being human? Why am I framing the questions in different ways? Because I want to listen to, it's like you're working with music. It's like you're working with drawing. You're using different kind of tones to awaken more than just the brain. And so an obstacle is the fact that perhaps I've been conditioned to look for solutions outside of me, that I've been trained in my adult life to focus on technology and on material achievements, and thinking that all solutions, all redemption will be found there. And I haven't cultivated the muscle of turning inside, to listen inside. Now, please, Nick, what would you add to this in terms of what obstacles we need to overcome, please?
Yeah, I wrote down two things that turned up immediately. The first was to not go sleepwalking, which I think you raised there in terms of being asleep to the actuality of the soul. You can wake up halfway through a day and think, actually, where am I? What have I been doing? What is the process I'm in? And becoming more in an automatic situation rather than ongoing awareness. And the second thing I put was to overcome the shouldn't morality. There's that overlording, maybe there's a better way to do this, or I ought not do it like that, or maybe I should try this, or I'm not so good at doing such and such, I'm no good enough. How about the constant self-questioning morality about ways and means?
Right, shooting all over yourself is a hell of an obstacle and a prevention to overcome. And learning to release those will be important. And so what I also added here is letting the brain and its obsessions run the show. These are some of the obstacles that we need to overcome. Let's bring Axo. What would you add to this, please, Axo?
Well, you're actually exactly following my box. This was the question: how to update my soul to my new operating system after a stroke. Because it has been such a shock that my soul is scattered.
Yeah. So you just demonstrated, first of all, the courage, speaking about it out in the open, here with all of us, in a safe environment. And not only that, you're actually able to describe some of the process that a stroke caused a shock to the operating system. So your readiness, your courage is first of all something you are already teaching all of us. What's it like to show up with others in a way where you know, and people that have had experience with you before recognize that you can't access the ease of expression you've had before, even though the rich intelligence is latent in you, but you may not be able to access it right now. So you, first of all, you have a very important role. You're going to teach us along the journey about this, about self-compassion, about self-care, about not comparing yourself to the way you were before, about permission to progress in your pace, not in comparison to anybody else. There is a lot of teaching there you are bringing to us simply by your presence here. So thank you. Thank you, Axel.
Thank you.
Let's bring Denise. What would you offer into this inquiry about what stands in the way of attuning to the deeper actuality and reality of being spiritual?
I just want to confirm what 2 or 3 people have already said is your limiting beliefs and judgment, and then also your expectation. You know, you may have a limited view of what's expected, or you may expect something that is not possible. So it's the confinement of how you think about what is possible. Pretty much what everybody said.
Indeed. So yeah, I brought these 2 next frames because I think you talked about the last one I just brought up, being conditioned insatiably to seek external validation is part of that, and also taking in and carrying frequencies and natures that are really foreign, really alien to the nature of the soul. Disarming, releasing those are some of the work. Hopefully, Liz, we are building some new awareness about the question you framed there. These are some of the things we need to overcome to be able to more fully attune to the soul. I mean, this last one I brought there, by design, socially, we are conditioned and trained to continually seek external validation. You want people to confirm us. We want people to tell us how smart we are, how much we're doing well, and all the rest of it. But what if attuning to your soul requires that actually you give yourself permission to make some moves that are not immediately or not at all validated by others? Will you have the courage? Will you have the strength to listen to those notes? Where Axel just demonstrated to us that the importance of courage. Here is a human being who is extraordinarily intelligent, who experienced stroke and cannot access the fullness of his intelligence, and it's not holding him back from actually showing up in the environment with us and participating. And can we fully appreciate what is the soul courage that he is demonstrating? Well, that's something for us to sense and appreciate. So let me bring Mona. Please, Mona, what would you want to add to this?
I'd add a large territory that I'd call assumption. And that has things in it like, I know it, I already understand it, I got what that is. The kind of things where you rely on what's already in your toolbox, and it stops the inquiry from happening. So you never get to the point of being able to interface with asking yourself important questions or exploring a territory, because you're based in the assumption that you've already got it.
That's very potent observation. The 2 dimensions in what you're offering, Mona, it's both staying in the limitation of your assumptions, and it's also this orientation of arresting ourselves in what we know, rather than living into the inquiry that's beyond what we know. We could obviously bring into it more of the psychological dimension. We stay, as human beings, we like to stay in what we know because it provides us a sense of control. It's truly surrendering to the inquiry beyond what we know is to invite ourselves into an area where we don't have control. Thank you. Let's bring Kyriaki. What would you want to build into this loom, please?
Yes, thank you. I was thinking of the fact that apart from maybe a personal traumatic experience that make our soul shrink or creates various scars and cracks in the wholeness of our soul and gets us frozen, gets the guardian of safety frozen. So unless the guardian of safety is relaxed, is at ease, then the two other functions of the soul, the steward of learning and the guardian of purpose, the champion of purpose, they cannot fully operate. So I was thinking of personal trauma, but also of maybe collective trauma. Let's say you're born, I don't know, in a country where there is a collective trauma of that nation. So your soul not only carries your personal trauma, but maybe carries the collective trauma of the nation or the ghosts of the nation. So that can be stopping you from really discovering, even sometimes, you know, the ghosts that are related with being a woman.
Yes.
Or the ghosts that are related with being a Black woman, for instance. Or so you don't only have to overcome your own trauma, but also the collective trauma of where you were born.
I really appreciate that you're integrating the earlier chapters and the appreciation of the three lives of this from chapter 1 and the appreciation of the formation of the compensatory act of the psychology of the soul in the nature of the ghost from chapter 2. So indeed, these are dimensions of awareness. The first one you talk to is when we are locked in the survivalist mode, and that can be because of practical conditions, but it can also be part of simply the impact of trauma. So those are additional, indeed, dimensions here to add, all of which is part of this inventory. We're running here really an inventory of what we would need to overcome. So what would you add to this, please, Liz?
I recognized that need to know. First of all, I wrote down busyness.
Yep.
Dismissal, like can't do that. Everything everybody has said. Resistance, like, oh, too much work, too much commitment, and the need to know. And on the need to know element, I actually felt like information from the past kind of download, and it showed me that for me, this soul relationship of communication is often presented like jigsaw puzzle pieces. It's not linear. It's not straight out. It's like I hear something within my own being, and then I get a deep affirmation. Like you talked about that shiver through your spine. And it's like, oh, that's interesting. Like if I just meet it with curiosity, oh, that's interesting. And I have learned, and I am learning still, that if I take it and I just hold it and I set it in a place for me to look at. So I'm having that happen with me right now. Moving to Colorado from Florida, I heard this voice in my head and it said, you know, there's a poet that lives within you. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And then last week, I got a piece of information. I was in my closet and it was like, this is a perfect podcasting spot. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And then last week, I got haiku is the form of poetry. Oh, that's interesting. And so, you know, it's shifting from the resistance for me to the curiosity, to the trust, to the surrender. I won't be able to put this whole thing together, but when it happens, I will know it. And that integrated awakening of excitement and enthusiasm will become alive again. So that's a little process.
And I appreciate that you're already guiding us to integrate not just what's on the loom here of obstacles, but some of the ways to address these, and to just name the practice you demonstrated, and why we are saying that the soul journey is not limited by the brain, because that way of, number one, curiosity, and number two, being prepared to hold mystery box questions in ways where there isn't yet an immediate clear integration of what it is an answer to. Holding open-ended questions and holding answers that we didn't find yet what they are an answer for. The pieces, it's next time you play with your grandchild the jigsaw puzzle game, and you pick up a piece and you say, where does it belong? How about integrating into it the consideration that this is in some way emulating the way of the soul? So I do want to bring Marianne and move to the next piece here. So you already said that needing to fit social conventions and expectations is a big one. And please, Marianne, were you going to add anything else there?
Well, I thought about fears.
About?
Fears.
Yes.
Fears about, really at the survival level, having enough money, whether, all kinds of safety issues that can sometimes also be irrational.
Yes.
Not necessarily really life-threatening things can also cause fear.
Yes. Well, you're really naming the big elephant in the room. When you are in a survival environment, and some people here are participating right now in this conversation, and they are in an environment that has survival threats, that would offer a major obstacle, a major challenge. And so how do you disarm that? And what's the way to process through that? Is at the moment, we simply add it to the consideration. Jeremy, let's bring you in before we go back to go forward to continue to build the main loom we were in. What were you going to add here, please, Jeremy?
Yeah, hi. Awareness and dismissal. So awareness, actually being aware of what the soul might be nudging me about or a person about. And then if one does have some awareness, being prone to perhaps dismissing something that might seem a bit unusual or a bit left field.
So a very important comment. Dismissal is one of the fastest, easiest shrinkage move we make. We dismiss something that turned up. We say, well, it's nothing. It makes no sense. And what do you know? Perhaps you shut down, you closed a gate of possibility for you. So friends, we are now coming back to this loom that we started to cultivate. And what I demonstrated here is, so what stands in the way and interferes with getting deeply attuned to your soul? What we demonstrated here, that you can literally take any space in your loom and cultivate the loom of that space. So why attune to your soul? Well, I begin to answer that because it's natural to attune to the soul, because we show up here in this life in the first place, attune to our souls in a natural, automatic way. And part of the meaning of being in the human experiment is to discover the path to attune to the soul. So why? Well, why not? And why? Because I would want to live the fuller scale, the fuller range, the fuller possibility of human life. And then I add to this inquiry one more dimension. I ask, what is the larger context within which to appreciate the endeavor to attune to your soul? And after that, in a minute, we will be ready to go and experiment a bit in rooms and share a bit with each other what's appearing in your looms. Why do I bring this last space? Because I ask, why attune to your soul? And for me, the question is non-linear. It's more a symphonic inquiry. And I ask, what are the other inquiries that would augment and expand for me the why? So I ask, what is the larger context? Well, the larger context for me at this time, the larger context why this work into the soul, the portals into the soul emerged, was the bigger unfolding epochal story. The fact that we have entered the time that some call the great release, some call the end of times, some call the beginning of new times. We have been narrating on portals and in the sister endeavor of portals, the epoch journey, the epochal transition. And one of the key artifacts that we brought to center stage in the epochal story is the meta crisis. And the meta crisis is framed as the convergence of dozen or more different wicked crisis points that are all interlinked. And the assertion is that, as chapter 3 and chapter 4 offered, we are not going to be able to solve those problems, to paraphrase on Einstein, with the same mindset that created these problems in the first place. And so how do we assimilate a new framework? Well, the suggestion is that we need to engage the soul. We need to bring the soul into this inquiry. Part of why we are seeking to reintegrate the soul is to say, guess what, friends? With all our sophisticated minds, by themselves and with all the advanced AI technology, we're actually not going to be able to solve the challenges that humanity is facing this next couple of decades. Okay, the run-up from 2024, where we are, to 2030, 31, 32, and what's going to happen in the next 8-9 years. What is, for some, they call it the time of the great release. Others call it the great reckoning. And then the journey from there to 2040 and mid-40s, where ultimately our claim, our conviction is humanity is going to face tremendous challenges and is going to be able to come through. But to come through, a growing cross-section of humanity is waking up now to the realization that we need to lean into and reintegrate the conversation with the soul, to bring into the conversation the spiritual dimension of life, and to learn to attune to our soul such that we are able to access the intelligence we need to meet those difficult challenges. So I just brought here a bit of a sobering note at this point before I give us a transition to rooms. The invitation in rooms would be to share one frame, one inquiry that emerged for you. We're going to spend 12 minutes in rooms in groups of 3. An opportunity to share what is emerging for you. And Marianne has a point before, please.
have been pondering quite a while about just that question, and also in an old-fashioned kind of groundwork way, where trying to find examples of how to be in this so-called apocalyptic time, and it's said in the Bible. I'm not Christian, but in the Bible, sometimes something interesting is said, and it's also always being said that the meek will inherit the earth. So I pondered, well, what do they mean? What exactly is meek? And I came to the conclusion that it had to do with flexibility. And the classic way in which we are raised is always to be very good at being in control of things and putting our will upon that which is going on. And clearly what's coming upon us is so much greater than anyone could possibly control or have the idea of putting its will upon. That I
Indeed.
guess that being weak, being flexible is the only way to get through that. And that would mean that you have to act from within and be small and adaptable. And I guess the soul is the only thing that can do that.
So yes and yes and yes. Thank you for bringing this awareness. Part of how we are approaching this challenge is indeed by attuning to the soul. If I may offer one little coaching advice for you, I would drop the word only. When we say only, we tell the soul there is only one pathway. One of the things we do here with this work with the Loom technology, Loom process, is this idea that there isn't just one way. There are many ways. There are as many ways as the people in the room, and each person can discover and explore many pathways.
Yeah.
So we're going to go into rooms in a minute. When we come back, I'm going to take us through another layer of discovery about attuning to the soul, and then what might the soul choose to, and we may choose to attune the soul to. So how about that as an approach? Try to stay within the frame of the invitation. 12 minutes, groups of threes. Share something on your Loom. You may even bring it up and have a bit of a encouragement and fortifying each other. I mean, we are all here in the workshopping of this. It's a discovery, getting our all hands on deck involved in the workshopping. Please enjoy the discovery. And when we come back, we'll do a brief bio break, and then we will pick up another pathway into the furtherance of the journey. Let's please, Lisa, drop us into rooms.